Have you ever noticed that sometimes, without even thinking about it, you start humming? Maybe while cooking dinner, maybe while taking a walk, maybe while sitting alone in a quiet room. You don't plan it, you don't force it, it simply happens. And yet, what if that simple sound, something most people dismiss as meaningless, was triggering a chain reaction throughout your entire body? What if a 60-second hum could influence your breathing, affect your nervous system, stimulate hidden chambers inside your skull, and activate biological processes that scientists are still trying to fully understand? It sounds unlikely, almost too simple. After all, we live in a world that constantly tells us that health improvements require expensive technology, complicated routines, specialized training, or powerful medications. But sometimes the most fascinating mechanisms are hiding inside ordinary human behaviors, and humming may be one of them. Right now, before we go any further, try something. Close your mouth, take a comfortable breath, then hum a single note for 10 seconds. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to create a steady vibration. As you do, pay attention to what you feel. Notice the subtle buzzing around your nose, the vibration behind your cheeks, the sensation spreading through your forehead, maybe even a faint resonance somewhere deeper inside your head. Those sensations are not imaginary. Something real is happening. The question is, what? For most of human history, people hummed without asking why. Monks hummed during meditation, farmers hummed while working, parents hummed to calm children, musicians hummed while creating melodies. People across cultures and generations discovered that humming somehow felt good long before science began investigating it. Only recently have researchers started uncovering what may be happening beneath the surface. And the deeper scientists look, the more fascinating the picture becomes. To understand why humming feels different from ordinary speech, we first need to take a journey inside your skull. Hidden within the bones of your face are a series of hollow chambers known as the paranasal sinuses. Most people only think about them when they become congested. But these structures are far more interesting than many realize. Behind your cheeks are the maxillary sinuses. Above your eyebrows are the frontal sinuses. Between your eyes sit the ethmoid sinuses. And deeper inside the center of your skull are the sphenoid sinuses. Together, they form an interconnected network of air-filled spaces carved into bone. At first glance, they may seem like empty cavities, but in reality, they are dynamic structures with unique shapes, volumes, and acoustic properties. In other words, they respond to vibration. And vibration is exactly what humming creates. Every time you hum, your vocal cords generate a steady frequency. Unlike speech, which constantly changes pitch and rhythm, humming can maintain a stable tone for several seconds at a time. That stability turns out to matter, because when a consistent vibration enters an enclosed chamber filled with air, something remarkable can occur. Resonance. Resonance is one of the most powerful principles in physics. It's the reason a tuning fork can cause another tuning fork to vibrate. It's the reason a guitar body amplifies the movement of its strings. It's the reason opera singers can sometimes shatter glass under very specific conditions. When a vibration closely matches the natural frequency of a structure, that structure begins to vibrate more strongly. Energy transfers efficiently. The response grows. The effect becomes noticeable. Your sinuses behave in a surprisingly similar way. As humming vibrations travel through the bones of your face and skull, the air inside these chambers begins responding. The result is the buzzing sensation many people feel around their cheeks, forehead, and nose while humming. You are essentially turning parts of your skull into a natural resonance system, and that resonance may be doing more than simply creating a sensation, because the sinus cavities are lined with specialized cells that produce one of the most fascinating molecules in human biology, nitric oxide. If you've never heard of nitric oxide before, don't worry. Most people haven't. Yet this tiny molecule influences an astonishing number of processes throughout the body. It helps regulate blood vessel function. It participates in immune defense. It assists communication between cells. And under the right circumstances, it can influence how efficiently oxygen moves through the respiratory system. For years, researchers assumed the sinuses mainly served structural and respiratory purposes. Then scientists discovered that these cavities produce unusually high concentrations of nitric oxide. That finding changed everything. Suddenly, the sinuses were no longer viewed as passive airspaces. They appeared to be biologically active environments constantly generating an important signaling molecule. But there was another mystery. If nitric oxide was being produced inside the sinuses, how much of it actually reached the airway? And could anything influence that process? Researchers began investigating. What they discovered surprised them. During ordinary breathing, nitric oxide leaves the sinuses relatively slowly. The openings connecting the sinuses to the nasal passages are narrow. Air exchange occurs, but gradually. Then humming entered the picture. When volunteers hummed, airflow dynamics changed dramatically. The vibrations created pressure oscillations throughout the sinus system. Instead of relying solely on passive diffusion, air began moving in and out of the sinus cavities more effectively. Imagine gently pumping a bellows. Imagine moving fresh air through a chamber that would otherwise exchange gases slowly. That is similar to what researchers believe may be happening during humming. And the measurements were striking. Some studies reported dramatically higher levels of nasal nitric oxide during humming compared with quiet breathing. The increase wasn't subtle. It was significant enough to capture the attention of respiratory researchers around the world. Now, this is where things become especially important. Whenever discussions about nitric oxide appear online, exaggeration often follows. You'll see claims that humming can replace medications, that it can cure diseases, that it produces miraculous transformations. The evidence does not support those claims. Science rarely works that way. What research does suggest is something more realistic and arguably more interesting. A simple behavior may be enhancing natural biological processes that already exist inside the body. No magic, no miracle, just physiology, and sometimes physiology is amazing enough on its own. As nitric oxide enters the nasal passages and continues toward the lungs, it interacts with tissues involved in breathing and circulation. Nitric oxide is known to help relax smooth muscle within blood vessels. This allows blood vessels to widen slightly. In medicine, nitric oxide pathways have been studied for decades because of their influence on circulation and vascular health. Again, this does not mean humming acts like a pharmaceutical treatment. The scale is completely different, but it does demonstrate that a simple sound can engage biological systems connected to blood flow and respiratory function. And that's only one piece of the story. Because while your sinuses are resonating, another process is unfolding simultaneously. A process involving one of the most important nerves in the human body, the vagus nerve. If you've spent any time reading about stress, relaxation, meditation, or nervous system regulation, you've probably encountered this name. The vagus nerve acts like a communication highway, connecting the brain to multiple organs throughout the body. It helps regulate heart rate, breathing patterns, digestion, inflammatory responses, and many aspects of what scientists call the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest, recovery, and restoration. In modern life, many people spend enormous amounts of time in the opposite state. Constant stimulation, constant notifications, constant deadlines, constant pressure. The nervous system becomes accustomed to remaining alert, prepared, activated, sometimes even when no danger exists. And that chronic activation can leave people feeling mentally exhausted, physically tense, and emotionally drained. The body was designed to move between activation and recovery, but many people rarely experience enough recovery. This is where humming becomes especially interesting, because humming naturally changes the way you breathe, and breathing is one of the fastest ways to influence the nervous system. Think about what happens during a hum. You inhale briefly, then you exhale slowly while producing a continuous sound. The exhalation becomes longer than the inhalation, not because you're forcing it, not because you're counting, but because humming makes it happen automatically. And that extended exhale matters. Research has consistently shown that longer exhalations tend to encourage parasympathetic activity. In simple terms, they help signal safety to the body. Safety allows the nervous system to reduce unnecessary tension. Safety allows recovery mechanisms to activate. Safety allows the body to shift away from constant vigilance. The fascinating part is that humming creates this breathing pattern naturally. No timer, no app, no complicated instructions. Just a sound. And as we'll discover next, the vibration itself may be contributing to the effect in ways that scientists are only beginning to explore. The deeper scientists investigate humming, the more they encounter a fascinating reality. The human body does not operate as a collection of separate systems. Your lungs are connected to your heart. Your heart influences your brain. Your brain communicates with your nervous system. Your nervous system affects your breathing, and your breathing, in turn, feeds information back into all of them. Everything is connected. That is why something as simple as humming can create effects that seem surprisingly widespread, not because humming is magical, but because the body itself is interconnected. To understand this better, we need to return to the vagus nerve. If the nervous system were an orchestra, the vagus nerve would be one of its conductors, stretching from the brainstem through the neck and into the chest and abdomen. It carries information in both directions. Signals travel from the brain to the body. Signals travel from the body back to the brain. This continuous conversation helps regulate countless automatic functions without us even realizing it. Heart rhythm, breathing patterns, digestion, blood pressure, emotional regulation, even aspects of attention and social engagement. Scientists estimate that the majority of vagal fibers actually carry information from the body back to the brain, rather than the other way around. In other words, your body is constantly reporting its condition to your brain, and your brain is constantly adjusting based on those reports. This raises an interesting question. What message does humming send? Part of the answer may lie in vibration itself. When you hum, your vocal cords create a steady mechanical vibration, unlike speaking, where sounds constantly start and stop. Humming creates continuity. The vibration remains stable, consistent, unbroken, and that vibration travels through tissues in the throat and neck where branches of the vagus nerve are located. Researchers continue exploring how mechanical stimulation influences neural activity, but what is already clear is that vibration has measurable effects on human physiology. This principle is used in multiple areas of medicine and rehabilitation. The body responds to mechanical signals. It always has. Now combine that vibration with prolonged exhalation. Suddenly, two different inputs are occurring simultaneously, a steady vibratory signal and a breathing pattern associated with relaxation. Together, they may help explain why humming often feels calming almost immediately. Many people notice subtle changes within seconds. The shoulders begin to drop, the jaw softens, the forehead relaxes, breathing becomes smoother. The mind feels less chaotic, thoughts slow down, the body feels heavier, grounded, present. Not because a problem has disappeared, but because the nervous system has temporarily shifted into a different operating mode. This is important. Most people spend their lives trying to control their thoughts. Humming works from the opposite direction. Instead of directly changing thoughts, it changes physiological inputs. And when physiology changes, mental state often follows. Consider this: if your heart begins beating slightly slower, if your breathing becomes more regular, if muscle tension decreases, if your nervous system detects signals associated with safety, then your brain receives evidence that the environment is not threatening. And when the brain believes it is safe, mental experience changes. The body leads. The mind follows. This principle appears repeatedly throughout human biology. The state of the body influences the state of the mind far more than most people realize, and humming may be one of the simplest demonstrations of that relationship. But there is another layer to this story, one that involves the way sound travels through bone. Most people assume hearing occurs entirely through air. Sound enters the ear canal. The eardrum vibrates. Tiny bones transmit the signal. The brain interprets the information. That explanation is correct, but it is incomplete. There is another pathway: bone. Conduction. Sound can travel through solid structures. In fact, it travels through solids far more efficiently than through air. This is why placing your ear against a railroad track allows you to hear an approaching train long before you would hear it through the air. The vibration moves through the metal rapidly. Your skull functions in a similar way. When you hum, vibrations travel through the bones of your face and head. Those vibrations reach the inner ear directly. This is one reason your own voice sounds different to you than it sounds to everyone else. You hear both air-conducted sound and bone-conducted sound simultaneously. Everyone else hears only the air-conducted version. The result is a richer, deeper internal experience. During humming, this internal acoustic environment becomes especially pronounced. The vibration seems to fill the head. The sound feels closer, more immersive, more physical, almost as though you're experiencing sound from the inside rather than from the outside. That distinction matters. External sounds compete for attention. Internal sounds often guide attention inward. And that inward shift may explain another fascinating aspect of humming. It naturally promotes interoception. Interoception is the ability to perceive internal sensations within the body. Your heartbeat, your breathing, muscle tension, temperature changes, gut sensations, internal awareness. People with stronger interoceptive awareness often demonstrate greater emotional regulation and improved self-awareness. Meditation practices frequently aim to strengthen this ability. Interestingly, humming may encourage a similar process automatically, because when you hum, attention naturally follows sensation. You notice the vibration. You notice the breath. You notice the resonance. You become aware of physical experiences that normally remain in the background. For a moment, your attention leaves the endless stream of external stimulation and returns to the body. This alone may help explain why humming feels surprisingly restorative. Modern life pulls attention outward. Humming gently pulls it inward, not through effort, not through concentration, simply through sensation. And there is yet another reason this matters. The human brain evolved in environments very different from today's world. For most of human history, there were no smartphones, no social media feeds, no 24-hour news cycles, no endless digital interruptions. The nervous system evolved around rhythms, breathing rhythms, walking rhythms, drumming rhythms, chanting rhythms, seasonal rhythms, natural cycles. Humans have always responded to rhythm. It is deeply embedded in our biology. Researchers studying music, chanting, and synchronized movement repeatedly observe similar patterns. Rhythm influences physiology. Groups that sing together often experience measurable changes in heart rate synchronization. Breathing patterns become coordinated. Stress markers may decrease. Social bonding increases. Something about shared rhythm appears fundamentally human. Humming may represent one of the simplest forms of rhythm available to us. A steady tone, a predictable vibration, a repeating respiratory pattern. No equipment required, no training necessary. Just a sound produced by the body itself. And perhaps that simplicity is exactly why it has persisted throughout human history. Long before anyone understood nitric oxide, long before anyone studied vagus nerve activity, long before anyone measured heart rate variability, people hummed. They may not have known why it felt good, but they knew it did. Science often works this way. Human beings discover useful behaviors first. Explanations arrive later. The behavior comes before the mechanism, and humming appears to fit that pattern perfectly. Yet the most interesting question remains unanswered. What happens if humming becomes a daily habit rather than an occasional accident? What happens when a 60-second hum becomes a consistent practice? Can repeated exposure influence stress resilience? Can it affect focus? Can it improve the way people transition from high-pressure states into recovery states? Researchers are still exploring these questions, but the emerging evidence points towards something important. Small actions performed consistently often produce larger effects than dramatic actions performed occasionally. And humming may be one of the simplest small actions available. No special equipment, no expensive membership, no supplements, no complicated techniques, just your breath, your voice, and a vibration that your body appears remarkably well designed to receive. In the next section, we'll explore what happens during a full 60-second humming session, why many people report feeling mentally clearer afterward, and how a simple daily humming ritual may become one of the easiest nervous system recovery tools available. Now let's imagine something simple. You finish a stressful day. Your phone has been buzzing for hours. You've answered emails, handled responsibilities, made decisions, solved problems. Your attention has been pulled in 100 different directions. By evening, your body may still be carrying the residue of that stress, even if the stressful events themselves are over. This is one of the strange realities of modern life. The mind can leave a situation long before the nervous system does. The meeting ends, the argument ends, the deadline passes, yet the body continues behaving as if the challenge is still present. Heart rate remains elevated, muscles stay tense. Breathing remains shallow, thoughts continue racing. The danger is gone. but the body hasn't received the message. This is where a 60-second hum becomes surprisingly interesting. Because unlike many relaxation techniques that require concentration, humming works through physical mechanisms that continue whether you think about them or not. The moment you begin humming, several processes start unfolding simultaneously. Your exhalation lengthens, your vocal cords vibrate, your facial bones conduct sound, your sinus cavities resonate, your attention shifts inward, and your nervous system begins receiving a completely different stream of information than it was receiving moments before. Think about that. For most of the day, your brain may be processing notifications, conversations, deadlines, concerns, and endless external stimuli. Then suddenly, for 1 minute, the primary thing your nervous system detects is a steady vibration generated by your own body. The signal changes, and when signals change, physiology often follows. Scientists sometimes describe the nervous system as a prediction machine. Its primary job is not merely responding to the world. Its primary job is predicting what will happen next. Every second, your brain is gathering information and asking a silent question. Am I safe? The answer is not determined by logic alone. It is determined by evidence. Breathing patterns provide evidence. Muscle tension provides evidence. Heart rhythm provides evidence. Internal sensations provide evidence. When breathing becomes slow and controlled, that is evidence. When vibration remains steady and predictable, that is evidence. When the body begins shifting toward a calmer state, that is evidence. The nervous system constantly interprets these signals, and the interpretation influences how you feel. This helps explain why many people report an interesting experience after humming for a minute or two. The environment hasn't changed. The problems haven't disappeared. Yet something feels different. The mental noise seems quieter. The mind feels less scattered. The body feels more settled. Some people describe it as calm. Others describe it as clarity. Others simply say they feel better. Different words, similar experience. But there may be another factor contributing to that experience. Attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources the human brain possesses. And in today's world, it is constantly under attack. Every notification competes for it. Every advertisement seeks it. Every social media platform is designed to capture it. The result is fragmentation. Attention gets divided into smaller and smaller pieces, and fragmented attention often creates fragmented experience. You start one task, switch to another, check a message, return to the first task, open another app, respond to an alert, repeat hour after hour, day after day. The brain becomes accustomed to constant interruption. Humming interrupts the interruptions, not because it forces concentration, but because vibration naturally attracts awareness. Try humming right now. Notice what happens. It is difficult to ignore the sensation. The vibration occupies awareness. Your attention becomes anchored to a physical experience occurring in real time. For 60 seconds, the mind has something simple to follow. A sound, a breath, a vibration, nothing more. And sometimes, simplicity is exactly what the nervous system needs. This may be one reason why humming appears in so many contemplative traditions around the world. Long before neuroscience existed, people discovered practices involving repetitive sounds, chants, and vocal vibrations. Different cultures developed different methods. Different religions used different words. Different traditions created different rituals. Yet a common pattern repeatedly emerged. Humans found that sustained vocal sounds influenced their internal state. Today, Science is gradually uncovering possible explanations. But the experience itself is ancient, perhaps because it taps into systems that have always been part of human biology. Consider what happens when a baby is distressed. A parent doesn't usually begin with complex instructions. They don't explain neuroscience. They don't discuss autonomic regulation. Instead, they often use sound, a gentle hum, a soft melody, a soothing vocal vibration, instinctively, across cultures, across generations. The behavior appears almost universal. Why? Because human beings seem deeply responsive to rhythmic vocal sounds, not only when we hear them from others, but also when we create them ourselves. The body appears designed to recognize these signals, and that recognition may reach deeper than conscious thought. Imagine for a moment that your nervous system evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. For most of that time, survival depended on accurately detecting danger. A sudden noise could indicate a predator. An unexpected movement could signal a threat. Hypervigilance had value. But recovery had value too. A nervous system stuck permanently in emergency mode would waste enormous energy. Therefore, evolution favored mechanisms that could signal when danger had passed. Mechanisms that allowed the body to return to baseline. Mechanisms that restored balance. Researchers continue exploring exactly how humming fits into this picture. But its characteristics are interesting. Steady, predictable, rhythmic, controlled, self-generated, all qualities associated with safety rather than threat. No predator hums, no emergency hums, no crisis hums. Humming is fundamentally incompatible with panic. Think about that. Try to sustain a smooth, comfortable hum while experiencing intense panic. It's difficult, not impossible, but difficult. Because humming naturally encourages physiological patterns opposite to those associated with acute stress. Longer exhalations, slower breathing, reduced muscular tension, greater respiratory control. The body begins moving away from emergency physiology and toward recovery physiology. Again, this doesn't mean humming is a cure for anxiety or depression or any medical condition. Those are complex issues requiring appropriate professional care when necessary. But it does suggest that humming may be a useful tool for influencing moment-to-moment physiological state. A tool available to nearly everyone. A tool requiring no special equipment. A tool that travels with you wherever you go. And perhaps that accessibility is one of its greatest strengths. The most effective wellness practice in the world is useless if people never do it. Complex systems often fail because complexity creates resistance. The harder a habit becomes, the less likely it survives. Humming is different. You can do it while walking, while cooking, while gardening, while sitting in traffic, while watching the sunset, while waiting for coffee, while standing in line. The barrier to entry is almost non-existent, and that matters because consistency often matters more than intensity. Small actions repeated daily frequently outperform dramatic actions performed occasionally. 1 minute today, 1 minute tomorrow, 1 minute next week. The effects accumulate not because each session is extraordinary, but because the behavior becomes familiar, natural, automatic, part of life. And perhaps that is the real lesson hidden inside something as ordinary as a hum. The body is not always asking for more complexity. Sometimes it is asking for rhythm. Sometimes it is asking for breath. Sometimes it is asking for vibration. Sometimes it is asking for a moment of stillness in a world that rarely stops moving. And sometimes the doorway to that stillness is nothing more than a simple sound you've been capable of making your entire life. Yet we're still only scratching the surface, because the final piece of this story reveals why many researchers believe humming represents something larger than a breathing exercise, a vocal habit, or a relaxation technique. It may actually be an example of a hidden principle found throughout human biology. The body often contains built-in mechanisms for self-regulation that most people never realize they're using. And once you understand that principle, you'll never think about humming the same way again.